Persia, now known as Iran, is a fascinating country with a history that dates back to the dawn of civilization. It has been a major power since long before the rise of Rome and continues to influence the political landscape of the Middle East and Eurasia today. Situated between Europe and Asia, Persia has long been a hub of trade, knowledge, and cultural exchange. Despite enduring numerous invasions and conquests, it has repeatedly reasserted itself as a significant force in the region. This documentary will delve into the origins of Persia and explore what made it one of the most enduring and influential civilizations in history. The area that is now Iran has been inhabited since prehistoric times and was home to some of the earliest agricultural settlements. Sites such as Chogha Golan and Chogha Bonut in the Zagros Mountains date back to around 7200 BC, showing evidence of early cultivation of crops like wild barley, lentils, and legumes. One remarkable discovery from this region is a 7,000-year-old jar of wine, now displayed at the University of Pennsylvania. The culture of this area has long been intertwined with that of Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. One of the earliest Sumerian cities, Uruk, is believed to have expanded eastward, leading to the establishment of Susa around 4395 BC or earlier. Susa later became the capital of Elam, the first recognized civilization in what would eventually become Persia. Over its 5,500-year history, Susa remained an essential center for trade and economy until the Mongol invasion. Unlike modern nation-states, Elam was likely a federation of various tribes and peoples living in the mountainous regions. While the Mesopotamians referred to them as Elamites, they likely called themselves something akin to Haltamti, or people of the high country. This distinction between the mountain and plains dwellers became a defining feature of Persian identity, setting them apart from their Mesopotamian neighbors. The two regions often clashed, competing for dominance. The rugged mountains of Elam made large-scale irrigation farming impossible, unlike the fertile plains of Mesopotamia. Instead, life in Elam revolved around semi-nomadic herding and small-scale valley farming. This way of life produced a population that, though smaller in number, was physically resilient compared to the more sophisticated and densely populated agricultural societies of the plains. In many ways, the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s was a continuation of this ancient struggle between mountain and lowland civilizations. The daily life of the Elamites remains somewhat mysterious because their writing, first appearing around 3200 BC, has not been fully deciphered. The Elamite language, now extinct, appears unrelated to any known language in the region. However, recent breakthroughs in deciphering Elamite script may provide new insights into their civilization. Elamite art suggests a strong cultural focus on animals, particularly dogs and bulls, in contrast to the human and hybrid figures favored by the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Egyptians. Their religion was polytheistic and centered on nature worship, with a significant emphasis on a mother goddess. Rituals were often performed in sacred groves or mountain sites. Unlike many ancient cultures, the Elamites had a tolerant religious outlook, often incorporating the deities of neighboring civilizations into their pantheon. Elements of their spiritual practices, such as worship on elevated sites and the personification of natural forces, later influenced Zoroastrianism, the dominant religion of Persia, for centuries. A distinctive feature of Elamite culture was its respect for women. Women were portrayed as equals in artistic depictions, and queens were often shown alongside kings as their peers. This tradition of recognizing women's status continued in later Persian societies. Despite its cultural and economic strengths, Elam was frequently invaded by its more powerful Mesopotamian neighbors. It was on the losing side of the world's first recorded war when the Sumerians invaded and looted Elam in 2700 BC. Susa later fell under Sumerian control during the reign of the legendary Sargon of Akkad. However, no empire lasts forever. By 1100 BC, Elam regained its strength, and King Shutruk-Kunti led successful military campaigns, even dominating much of Babylon. Yet Elam struggled with internal power conflicts, particularly among royal heirs. In 1120 BC, Babylonian King Nebuchadnezzar conquered Elam, illustrating the ever-changing balance of power in the region. Trade was vital to Elam's economy. Artifacts from the Indus Valley Civilization, modern-day Pakistan, eastern Iran, and Afghanistan have been found in Susa, demonstrating extensive trade networks. Elam likely acted as a middleman, facilitating the exchange of goods between Mesopotamia and the East. It was a key supplier of tin from Afghanistan, an essential metal for making bronze, as well as stone, wood, and metal for the resource-scarce Mesopotamian plains. Over time, these trade routes evolved into the Silk Road, with Persia at its center. Elam's power eventually waned as Iranian or Aryan tribes migrated into the region. These nomadic groups, originating from the Eurasian steppes, lived similarly to early Slavs, Turks, and Mongols. Over more than 1,000 years, beginning around 2000 BC, these Iranian peoples gradually integrated with the Elamites, particularly in the south. Although the Iranians became the dominant force, Elamite influence persisted. The fact that the Elamite language remained the primary administrative language for a long time suggests that while the Iranians ruled politically, much of the bureaucracy remained in Elamite hands. One Iranian group, the Medes, began unifying the region under their first recognized ruler, Deioces, who ruled from 727 to 675 BC, according to Herodotus. However, Herodotus, known for embellishing history, as seen in the legendary 300 Spartans story, may have exaggerated Deioces' role. Nevertheless, the rise of the Medes was largely a response to the brutal expansion of the Assyrian Empire. Deioces' grandson, Cyaxares, would later form an alliance with the Babylonians and in 612 BC play a key role in the destruction of the Assyrian capital, Nineveh. By 700 BC, the region was largely inhabited by Iranian groups, including the Medes, Persians, and Parthians. While the Medes are credited with founding the first Iranian empire and helping to bring down the Assyrians, it was the Persians who would go on to establish the next great empire of the region. Under the leadership of Cyrus the Great, the Persians founded the Achaemenid Empire, the first true Persian empire. Originally a vassal state under the Medes, Cyrus rebelled in 553 BC, beginning a series of legendary conquests. By 539 BC he had taken Babylon, and by 533 BC his rule extended as far as western India. Little is known about Cyrus before his uprising, but a crucial turning point in his rise was the defection of Harpagus, a Mede general who had been sent to crush his rebellion. Instead, Harpagus switched sides, joining Cyrus and ultimately contributing to the downfall of the Medes and the emergence of the Persian Empire. But what convinced Harpagus to turn against his own people, and what made Cyrus such a remarkable leader? This documentary will explore these questions, unraveling the extraordinary story of Persia's ascent to power. Harpagus's true motives remain uncertain, as most historical sources from that time, including those of Herodotus, blend fact with myth. However, what is clear is that Harpagus became one of Cyrus' most trusted generals, suggesting that he may have recognized early on the extraordinary leadership qualities that would define Cyrus's rule. So what earned Cyrus the title of Great? First, he united the Iranian peoples under a centralized and well-structured empire. His administration was built on a system of regional governors known as satraps who managed their territories efficiently. Contemporary accounts suggest that this system was highly effective, benefiting the local populations. To maintain control, Cyrus also established a network of royal spies, known as the King's Eyes, who reported directly to him. The empire had 4 main capitals, offering regional autonomy, while keeping its administrative heart in Susa, the former center of Elamite civilization. Communication within the empire was streamlined through an advanced postal system, where couriers could quickly access fresh horses and supplies at stations placed no more than 2 days apart. This system was so efficient that it remained in use with little change until the Muslim conquests over 1,000 years later. Cyrus also left a lasting mark on legal traditions. His leadership was so influential that Thomas Jefferson studied the Cyropedia, Xenophon's account of Cyrus's rule, as a source of inspiration for the United States Declaration of Independence. Secondly, in 539 BC, Cyrus conquered Babylon and famously freed the Israelites from captivity. According to the Hebrew Bible, his actions were seen as divinely guided, making him the only non-Jewish figure in the Bible to be honored as a Messiah. Third, Cyrus was known for his tolerance and respect toward the cultures and religions of the people he ruled. To the Iranians, he was a father figure. To the Babylonians, he was a liberator. This approach set him apart from many previous rulers and contributed to the lasting success of the Persian Empire. Fourth, Cyrus established an elite military unit known as the Immortals, a force of 10,000 highly trained soldiers that remained the backbone of the Persian army until the empire's fall. As conquerors go, Cyrus was extraordinary. He built the largest empire the world had ever seen up to that point. expanding its reach with relatively minimal bloodshed while ensuring the protection of civilians and religious sites. His son continued this legacy, pushing the empire's borders even further. In 525 BC, he conquered Phoenicia and Cyprus, followed by Egypt, Nubia, and parts of modern-day Syria. Even today, the empire Cyrus founded remains the largest in Iranian history. His tomb still stands in Iran as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, while Persepolis, the grand city of the Achaemenids, remains one of the world's most significant archaeological sites. After Cyrus, his son was succeeded by Darius I, another great Persian ruler. Under Darius, the empire expanded into the Indus Valley, modern Pakistan, and launched its first invasion of Greece in 492 BC. However, due to bad luck and inadequate forces, the campaign ended in failure at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC. Determined to try again, Darius planned a second invasion but died in 486 BC, passing the responsibility to his son, Xerxes. Xerxes' military leadership was unremarkable, though he did manage to sack and burn Athens in 480 BC after the population had evacuated. However, later that year, the Persian fleet suffered a crushing defeat at the Battle of Salamis, forcing him to withdraw. At the same time, he faced a rebellion in Babylon. In 479 BC, the remaining Persian forces in Greece were ultimately defeated at the Battle of Plataea. Xerxes himself was assassinated in 465 BC by the commander of his royal guard. Despite Xerxes' setbacks, Persia remained one of the world's great powers for centuries, competing with Greece for dominance over Anatolia and the Aegean. Among the empire's most impressive achievements were its innovations in water management, essential for a region that receives only about 124 millimeters of rainfall annually. Darius the Great oversaw the construction of the Shushtar hydraulic system, which redirected river water to power mills, create artificial waterfalls, and irrigate nearly 100,000 acres of farmland and orchards. Another key innovation expanded by the Persians was the Qanat, an underground canal system that transported water from aquifers to agricultural lands. These structures minimized evaporation, ensured a consistent water supply, and were remarkably durable, resistant to both warfare and flooding. The Qanats were engineered with a precise gradient to maintain a steady flow of water, making them one of the most advanced irrigation systems of the ancient world. The Persians also developed the yakchal, a dome-shaped clay structure designed to store ice through the summer months. In the realm of music, they are credited with inventing the chartar, an early form of the modern guitar, and they played a major role in popularizing backgammon, one of the oldest surviving board games. While the origins of chess remain debated between Persia and India, the game became deeply ingrained in Persian culture. Persian society was diverse and integrated customs from many regions. While slavery existed, particularly in Babylon and Egypt, it was not as central to the economy as it was in Greece or later in Rome. Persian women also enjoyed considerable freedoms for the time. They could own land and businesses, manage money, and travel independently. Aristocratic women even rode horses and practiced archery, activities that were typically reserved for men in Greek society. However, despite these relative freedoms, political power remained exclusively in the hands of men. One of Persia's most lasting contributions to world history was Zoroastrianism, among the earliest monotheistic religions. Its founder, Zoroaster, or Zarathustra, is a somewhat mythical figure, traditionally dated to the 6th century BC, though some scholars believe he lived much earlier. Zoroastrianism depicted existence as a cosmic struggle between Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of good, and Angra Mainyu, the force of evil. It introduced key concepts such as free will and afterlife, angels, demons, and the moral battle between good and evil, ideas that later influenced Abrahamic religions, Buddhism, and Greek philosophy. A well-known Zoroastrian reference in the Bible is the story of the 3 magi who visited the infant Jesus, as magi was the term for Zoroastrian priests. Unlike later monotheistic traditions, Zoroastrianism portrayed its god as omniscient but not omnipotent, meaning he possessed all knowledge but not unlimited power. The religion also emphasized environmental stewardship, reinforcing Persia's long-standing commitment to sustainability and infrastructure development. Zoroastrianism's reverence for nature likely evolved from older animist and polytheistic traditions of the Iranian people and the Elamites. Fire played a central role in its rituals, with prayers often conducted in its presence or near flowing water. The Zoroastrian principle of Asha, truth and righteousness, was believed to have influenced Cyrus the Great's approach to governance and lawmaking, though he did not impose the religion on those he conquered. Today, Zoroastrianism remains a small but enduring faith, practiced primarily in India and Iran. The Persian Empire was relatively tolerant compared to other empires of its time. While it responded harshly to rebellions, it generally respected the cultures, customs, and religions of its subjects. Though autocratic, its government sought to improve the lives of ordinary people, promote justice, and establish an efficient administration with safeguards against corruption and abuse of power. Persia was a remarkable civilization that significantly advanced human progress, from progressive legal systems and women's rights to sophisticated irrigation methods and new religious philosophies. However, what Cyrus the Great and Darius the Great built would eventually fall to another legendary figure, Alexander the Great. Notably, Alexander was an admirer of Cyrus and studied Xenophon's Cyropaedia from a young age, drawing lessons from Cyrus's heroism in battle. Born in 356 BC in Macedonia, a kingdom on the northern edge of the Greek world, Alexander was personally tutored by Aristotle, one of history's greatest philosophers. By the age of 16, he was already leading an army and serving as regent in his father's absence. At 20, he ascended to the throne after his father, Philip of Macedon, was assassinated in 336 BC by the captain of his bodyguard, an eerily similar fate to that of Xerxes over a century earlier. Early in his reign, Alexander demonstrated his ruthlessness. He secured his rule by executing a cousin and 2 Macedonian princes, eliminating potential rivals. He also crushed uprisings swiftly, most notably by destroying the ancient city of Thebes in 335 BC and selling its population into slavery, except for pro-Macedonians and priests. Perhaps out of guilt or as a way to counter criticism, he later showed generosity towards surviving Thebans he encountered. Nevertheless, this brutal act effectively quashed any thoughts of rebellion among other Greek cities, including Athens. Like his father, Alexander assumed the title of hegemon, supreme commander, and quickly proved his military brilliance. Throughout his life, he remained undefeated in battle, securing his place as one of history's greatest generals. In 334 BC, Alexander launched his invasion of the Persian Empire with approximately 50,000 soldiers, including 6,000 cavalry and a naval force of 38,000 men. His campaign began with the conquest of western Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, home to many Greeks under Persian rule, before advancing into Syria and the Levant. The decisive confrontation between the Greco-Macedonian and Persian armies came at the Battle of Issus in 333 BC. King Darius III had positioned his forces in a narrow space between the mountains and the sea, hoping to trap Alexander. However, as the battle turned against the Persians, Darius unexpectedly fled, abandoning his army, his chariot, and even his own family, his wife, daughters, and mother. This shocking retreat shattered Persian morale and led to their first ever defeat under a reigning emperor, marking a major shift in power. Following his victory at Issus, Alexander besieged the Phoenician city of Tyre in 332 BC. When Tyre resisted, he destroyed the city, slaughtered its men, and sold its women and children into slavery. Gaza suffered a similar fate, despite wounding Alexander in battle. Egypt, however, surrendered without a fight, and in 331 BC he founded Alexandria, a city that would later become a major center of trade and learning, home to the renowned Lighthouse of Alexandria and the Great Library. Years after Issus, Darius III attempted to stop Alexander again at the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BC. This time, he had the advantage of superior numbers, favorable terrain, and seasoned commanders. Yet once again, before the battle was fully decided, Darius fled, causing his army to collapse. With this defeat, the Persian Empire effectively fell. Unable to rally another army, Darius lost control, and many Persian cities chose to surrender rather than risk Alexander's wrath. His previous acts of brutality in Tyre and Gaza discouraged resistance, while his willingness to spare those who submitted made capitulation an attractive option. Alexander's extraordinary military skill was undeniable, but his rapid conquest of Persia was also aided by Darius's failures. Twice, Darius abandoned an army that outnumbered the Greeks, allowing Alexander to secure victories that might have been far more difficult against a more resolute leader. Unlike Persian kings, who often commanded from the rear, Alexander fought at the front, risking his life alongside his soldiers. This earned him their unwavering loyalty, as they fought not just for Macedon, a distant homeland for many, but for Alexander himself. In contrast, Persian troops, drawn from various subject nations, had little motivation to fight for a king who repeatedly abandoned them in battle. Some historians argue that the Persian Empire was already in decline, making its fall inevitable. However, this remains debatable. The empire was still capable of raising vast armies and showed no signs of internal collapse. There were no major civil wars, nor did many local rulers defect to Alexander. Instead, Persia's downfall was largely due to the contrast between Darius III, an ineffective and indecisive ruler, and Alexander, a once-in-a-millennium military genius. Despite its strong administration and stability, Persia could not withstand Alexander's relentless campaign. By 330 BC, the Greeks had reached Persepolis, the Persian ceremonial capital, and looted it for days. A fire, either an act of revenge for Xerxes' burning of the Acropolis or a tragic accident, destroyed much of the city. Though Alexander later regretted the destruction, by then it was too late to undo the damage. The relationship between the Greeks and Persians was complex, shaped by centuries of war and rivalry, but also by mutual respect. Like many cultures, the Greeks dismissed as barbaric. They recognized Persia's sophistication and achievements. Plutarch records that when Alexander came across a fallen statue of Xerxes, he hesitated, debating whether to leave it on the ground as retribution for Persia's past invasions or restore it as a tribute to Xerxes' leadership and character. After Darius III's defeat, Alexander spent years chasing down claimants to the Persian throne across Central Asia, venturing into what is now Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan. Restless and ambitious, he then turned his attention to India in 326 BC. Though his initial battles were victorious, this campaign proved too much for his weary troops. After years of relentless warfare, they refused to march any further, forcing Alexander to abandon his plans for further conquests. By 324 BC, he had returned to Susa, Persia's administrative capital, where he sought to integrate Persian customs into his rule. His attempts to merge Greek and Persian traditions, including adopting Persian court rituals, created tension among his Greek and Macedonian followers. This culminated in a tragic incident. In a drunken rage, Alexander killed a close friend who had once saved his life. An argument over whether he had become corrupted by Persian influence led to the fatal confrontation. To unify his empire, Alexander integrated Greek and Persian military officers and arranged mass marriages between his generals and Persian noblewomen. However, these efforts had little lasting impact. He also worked to restore order by executing satraps found guilty of corruption or disloyalty. In 323 BC, shortly after returning to Persia, Alexander died suddenly, likely from a fever contracted in a nearby swamp. His unexpected death led to speculation about poisoning, but no definitive evidence supports this theory. Ironically, the man who had survived countless battles and conquered an empire fell not to treachery but to disease. Alexander was buried in Alexandria, but the fate of his remains after the 2nd century AD remains unknown. His empire, however, did not remain intact. When asked on his deathbed who should inherit his throne, he reportedly answered, "To the strongest." This ambiguous statement led to the division of his empire into 4 major regions. 1. Macedon and Greece. 2. Thrace and Western Anatolia. 3. Persia and Central Asia, Iran, Iraq, Syria and Lebanon. 4. Egypt, which also controlled parts of the Levant, Cyprus and southern Anatolia. These territories remained under Greek rule or influence for nearly 3 centuries, marking the Hellenistic Age. For most ordinary people, daily life changed little. Only the ruling elite shifted, blending Greek, Persian and local traditions. A key example was the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, founded by Alexander's general Ptolemy. While the Ptolemies relied on Greek colonists for their military and political power, they also embraced Egyptian customs. The last Ptolemaic ruler, Cleopatra, reigned until 30 BC, when her death ended Greek rule in Egypt and brought the region under Roman control. Alexander's conquests also led to the Hellenization of Central Asia, giving rise to the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, the last surviving remnant of his empire. This distant Greek-influenced kingdom played a crucial role in spreading Buddhism into China, illustrating the far-reaching cultural impact of Alexander's legacy. Persia, now under the Seleucid Empire, was ruled by Alexander's general Seleucus I. The Seleucids, locked in a fierce rivalry with Ptolemaic Egypt, struggled to maintain their vast domain. They lost control of their easternmost lands to the Indian Maurya Empire and failed in their attempts to expand into Greece, where they were defeated by Greek and Roman forces. These setbacks weakened the Seleucid Empire, leaving it vulnerable to new challenges. One of these challenges was the Parthians, a nomadic Iranian people from modern-day Turkmenistan. Initially ruled by Greek satraps under the Seleucids, the Parthians rebelled under Mithridates I the Great and took control of Persia in 155 BC. Persian history seemed to follow a familiar cycle. A central power based in Iran expands both east towards Central Asia and India and west toward the Levant and Anatolia. Strong rulers expand the empire, while weak ones oversee its decline. When a dynasty weakens significantly, it is eventually overthrown by nomadic invaders. Despite these transitions, Persian administrative structures and culture endured, with only the ruling elite changing. The Parthian Empire exemplified this continuity, blending Greek and Persian traditions. One notable cultural legacy was the cult of Mithra, which later influenced the Roman Mithraic mysteries, a secretive, hierarchical warrior cult popular among Roman legionaries and considered a rival to early Christianity. A key distinction between the Parthians and earlier Persian dynasties was their governing structure. Unlike the centralized rule of the Achaemenids and Seleucids, the Parthians adopted an aristocratic system in which power was distributed among the nobility rather than concentrated in a single ruler. This marked a significant shift in Persian governance. The Parthian political system allowed the nobility to remove an unfit king through a vote, preventing prolonged civil wars. At the same time, even the most influential nobles could be demoted or arrested by the king, provided the decision was deemed fair. This balance of power contributed to the empire's political stability, a stark contrast to the frequently divided Greeks and the Romans, who suffered from repeated and destructive civil wars. Parthia emerged as a powerful adversary to Rome, effectively blocking its eastern expansion. A key component of Parthian military success was its mounted archers, who preserved steppe warfare traditions more than previous nomadic conquerors. Their most famous battlefield tactic was the Parthian shot, a maneuver in which horse archers, while retreating, turned in their saddles to fire arrows at pursuing enemies. One of Parthia's most remarkable military victories was the defeat of Crassus, a member of the first triumvirate alongside Caesar and Pompey, at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC. According to legend, the Parthians executed Crassus by forcing him to swallow molten gold, a grim punishment for his legendary greed. The rise of the Sasanian Empire. The Sasanian Empire, the last pre-Islamic Persian dynasty, marked a resurgence of Persian cultural and political dominance. Founded in 224 AD by Ardashir, a noble from the same region as Cyrus the Great, the empire centralized power, distinguishing itself from the more decentralized aristocratic rule of the Parthians. The Sasanians revived Iranian traditions, making Zoroastrianism the state religion. While Hellenistic influences persisted in regions like Lebanon and Israel, Persia itself experienced a strong revival of its Iranian identity. This cultural and religious shift further separated the Sasanian Empire from its main rival, the Roman Empire, which was gradually embracing Christianity. Under Sasanian rule, Persia became a hub of scholarship and religious diversity. The Babylonian Talmud, one of the most significant texts in Jewish history, was compiled during this period, highlighting Persia's role as a center of Jewish learning. The empire also saw the emergence of Manichaeism, a syncretic faith founded by the prophet Mani, who sought to unify the teachings of Zoroaster, Jesus, and Buddha. However, the Zoroastrian priesthood and Sasanian rulers viewed it as heretical. Despite early persecution, Manichaeism spread widely before being suppressed by Christian, Chinese, and Islamic authorities, ultimately disappearing by the 14th century. Nevertheless, its influence persisted, shaping Gnostic Christian sects like the Cathars in medieval Europe. The Sasanian Golden Age and global influence. The Sasanian Empire was far more urbanized and centralized than its Parthian predecessor, marking a shift from a nomadic-influenced society to a structured state. The empire played a crucial role in Silk Road trade, linking Persia with China, India, and the Mediterranean world. The Sasanians and Chinese exchanged artists, musicians, and even military aid to protect trade routes from nomadic raiders. In addition to land-based commerce, the Sasanians expanded maritime trade, dominating the Indian Ocean and forcing the Romans out of the region. Their cultural contributions left a lasting impact. Sasanian architecture, literature, philosophy, and engineering significantly influenced Islamic civilization. Many elements associated with Islamic culture, including court etiquette, administrative structures, and artistic styles, actually originated in Sasanian Persia. One of the more enigmatic artifacts from this era is the so-called Baghdad Battery, an ancient clay jar containing a metal cylinder that some speculate may have functioned as a primitive electrical battery. Though its exact purpose remains unknown, it is sometimes cited as evidence of advanced Sasanian technological achievements. The Sasanian-Byzantine Wars and the Islamic conquest. By the 7th century, the Sasanian Empire was embroiled in a prolonged and exhausting war with the Byzantine, Eastern Roman Empire. This conflict, combined with a devastating plague, the Plague of Shero in 627 AD and Turkic invasions, severely weakened Persia's military and economy. In 628 AD, King Khosrow II was overthrown and executed, triggering a civil war with multiple factions vying for the throne. Between 628 and 632 AD, Persia was ravaged by internal conflict, just as Islam was emerging in Arabia. Shortly after Persia's civil war ended, the newly unified Arab Muslims launched an invasion of Mesopotamia. Initially repelled, they returned in 636 AD and decisively defeated the Persian army, seizing all Sasanian territories west of modern-day Iran. A final invasion in 642 AD led to the empire's complete collapse within a decade. Despite attempts to resist, Persian forces were ultimately overwhelmed. Arab conquerors burned Zoroastrian sacred texts, imposed heavy taxes, jizya, on non-Muslims, and enforced forced conversions. Many Persians fled to India, forming the Zoroastrian Parsi communities that still exist today. However, Islam did not immediately dominate Persia. It took centuries for it to fully replace Zoroastrianism, and Persian culture remained resilient despite the conquest. The caliphates and Persian influence on Islam. The Islamic conquest of Persia mirrored Arab advances against Byzantium, as the Rashidun Caliphate rapidly expanded its empire from Iran and Mesopotamia to Egypt, Libya, and Central Asia. Persia's relationship with Islam was complex. Though Islam was introduced by conquest, Persian civilization profoundly shaped Islamic philosophy, governance, and culture. Persian scholars, administrators, and military leaders played a pivotal role in the Islamic world, and Persian influence extended even to the Turkic tribes that later founded the Ottoman Empire. Despite Arab rule, Persian traditions endured, much as they had after previous conquests by the Medes, Greeks, and Parthians. The Islamic rulers adopted the Persian administrative system, and elements of Persian court culture were integrated into Arab governance. The Umayyad Caliphate, which succeeded the rise of the Sasanian Empire. The Sasanian Empire, the last pre-Islamic Persian dynasty, the Umayyad Caliphate, which succeeded the Rashidun Caliphate, reached its peak in 750 AD, spanning from Central Asia to the Pyrenees Mountains in Spain. However, its vast size led to fragmentation as logistical challenges and internal divisions weakened centralized control. The Sunni-Shia divide and the Abbasid Caliphate. One of the key factors in the Islamic world's fragmentation was the Sunni-Shia split, which originated from a dispute over Muhammad's rightful successor. Shia Muslims believed that Ali, Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, was the legitimate heir. Sunni Muslims supported the selection of Abu Bakr, chosen by a council of early Muslim leaders. While initially a political disagreement, this division deepened into theological and cultural differences, shaping Islamic history for centuries. Today, Iran is widely seen as the center of Shia Islam, often at odds with the predominantly Sunni Muslim nations. The Abbasid Caliphate eventually replaced the Umayyads, rising to power with the support of an Iranian general. This shift brought greater Persian influence, blending Arab and Persian traditions within a new imperial system. The Abbasids adopted Persian administrative practices, transforming governance across their empire. One of their most notable achievements was the establishment of Baghdad in 762 AD, near the ruins of ancient Babylon. The city quickly became an intellectual and commercial hub, home to the world's first paper mill, inspired by Chinese technology. Baghdad flourished as a center of learning and scholarship, preserving and translating works from Persian, Greek, and Roman civilizations. The Abbasids facilitated global trade and cultural exchange, spreading key Asian innovations to the West, including the sextant, the concept of zero, and gunpowder. The decline of Abbasid control and the rise of the Seljuks. Despite their achievements, the Abbasids struggled to maintain control over their vast empire, gradually losing key territories. Morocco in the 830s, Egypt in the 870s, North Africa in the 920s. By 945 AD, the empire came under the influence of the Seljuk Turks, nomadic warriors from the Eurasian steppes. This mirrored historical patterns in which declining dynasties were replaced by nomadic invaders. Although the Abbasids remained the nominal rulers, the Seljuks controlled military and state affairs, while Persian bureaucrats dominated administration. The Abbasid era is often credited with driving the Islamic Golden Age, a period of remarkable scientific and cultural advancements. Building on knowledge from Egyptian, Persian, Greek, and Roman civilizations, the Abbasids fostered the exchange of ideas across Eurasia. Breakthroughs were made in medicine, philosophy, astronomy, chemistry, physics, especially optics and mathematics, including the invention of algebra. Many of these innovations were driven by minority communities, such as Zoroastrians, Christians, and Jews. While excluded from political power, they played essential roles as scientists, doctors, and engineers, contributing significantly to the Abbasid intellectual legacy. Abbasid contributions to literature and culture. The Abbasids made significant contributions to the preservation and adaptation of literary traditions. One of their most enduring legacies is the 1001 Nights, Arabian Nights, which originated from Persian and Indian texts. Over time, additional folklore from Arab, Persian, Mesopotamian, and Egyptian cultures was woven into the narrative, introducing iconic characters like Aladdin, Sinbad, and Ali Baba. The Mongol invasion and the fall of Baghdad. While the Abbasid administration continued functioning under Seljuk rule, the cycle of nomadic invasions that replaced Persian dynasties was abruptly disrupted by the Mongol invasion. Unlike earlier nomadic conquerors, the Mongols were exceptionally destructive, leaving widespread devastation in their wake. In 1258 AD, the Mongols sacked Baghdad, marking the end of the Islamic Golden Age. Libraries, mosques, and centers of knowledge were set ablaze, and countless invaluable manuscripts were lost forever. They also destroyed khanats, Persian irrigation systems, leading to agricultural collapse and rendering many urban centers uninhabitable. Persia under Mongol rule and the rise of Tamerlane. After the Mongols took control, Persia eventually began to recover under the Ilkhanate, a Mongol dynasty that restored trade and rebuilt infrastructure. The Mongols themselves converted to Islam, particularly Sufism, which blended well with their previous animist and Buddhist beliefs. However, just as Persia was stabilizing, two catastrophic events struck. 1. The Black Death, 1349, which wiped out 30% of Persia's population. 2. The invasion of Tamerlane, Timur the Lame, in 1381, one of history's most brutal conquerors. Timur demanded unconditional surrender from cities, and if his terms were rejected, he massacred entire populations, enslaving or killing men, women, and children alike. His conquests may have claimed the lives of up to 17 million people, roughly 5% of the global population at the time. Some even saw him as an omen of the apocalypse. Despite his genocidal campaigns, Timur paradoxically supported the arts, architecture, and poetry. However, his empire, built on conquest, crumbled within a century of his death. The fragmentation of Persia and the rise of Shia Islam. Following the Mongol and Timurid invasions, Persia entered a long period of political fragmentation. Several Turkic tribal confederations gained control over parts of the region. The Black Sheep Turkmen, Karakoyunlu, 1452 AD, the White Sheep Turkmen, Akkoyunlu, 1467 AD. These repeated invasions shattered Persia's unity for the first time in millennia, creating room for the rise of religious movements. The most influential of these was the spread of Shia Islam, which laid the foundation for Iran's transformation into a Shia majority state. One pivotal figure in this transition was Ismail As, a ruler of mixed Turkmen, Kurdish, Greek, and Georgian descent. His diverse heritage made him a fitting leader for a region that had absorbed and integrated various cultures. Under his rule, Iranian-style Shia Islam began incorporating Sufi traditions, which deepened the theological divide between Iranian Shiism and Sunni Islam. The Safavid Empire, a resurgent Persia. From 1501 to 1511, Shah Ismail thus successfully reunified Persia, establishing the Safavid Empire, with borders that closely resemble modern-day Iran. His empire encompassed a vast territory, consolidating Persian power and influence in the region. The Safavid Empire and Persian-European trade. During the reign of Shah Abbas, Persia regained control of crucial trade routes in the Persian Gulf by expelling the Portuguese from Bahrain and Hormuz. This move strengthened Persia's dominance over key maritime routes. At the same time, European demand for Persian goods such as carpets, silk, and textiles grew substantially. While the living standards in Persia were comparable to those in Europe, particularly for commoners, Western travelers noted that much of the fertile land remained untapped. This was often attributed to poor governance and the ruling elite's lack of interest in agricultural development. The cultural and intellectual landscape of the Safavid era. The Safavid period produced many of Iran's most iconic architectural monuments, including the grand mosques of Isfahan. Isfahan flourished as a hub of learning and culture. However, by the mid-17th century, intellectual progress began to stagnate, as the pursuit of knowledge shifted towards rigid adherence to past scholarship, hindering innovation. This intellectual conservatism placed Persia at a disadvantage compared to Europe, which was embracing the scientific method. The successors of Shah Abbas I were less effective rulers, often more focused on indulgence than governance. Their weakness emboldened neighboring powers, especially Russia, which had been expanding eastward for 2 centuries. The decline of Safavid power and Russian expansion. Under Peter the Great, Russia invaded Persia's Caucasian territories in 1723. Simultaneously, regions like Afghanistan and Pakistan revolted against Persian rule, while the Ottomans seized parts of Iran. The Treaty of Constantinople, 1724, temporarily divided Persian lands between Russia and the Ottomans. However, by 1735, a Persian rebellion and a new conflict with the Ottomans helped restore most of these territories to Persia. Nadir Shah's conquests and the collapse of Safavid rule. Nadir Shah emerged as the leader behind Persia's resurgence in 1735, launching a campaign into India where he plundered Delhi, using the wealth to finance military campaigns against the Ottomans. However, Nadir's reign grew increasingly paranoid and cruel, and his assassination in 1747 marked the end of Safavid rule. At the time of his death, Persia controlled the Caucasus, Mesopotamia, and parts of Anatolia. Following Nadir Shah's death, Persia descended into an era of civil war and anarchy. Ultimately, in 1796, Agha emerged victorious and established the Qajar dynasty. The Qajar dynasty and Persia's struggle against colonial powers sought to reassert Persian control over the Caucasus, but by then, Persia was struggling to maintain its independence against the growing power of industrialized European empires. Under his successors, Persia lost substantial territory. The Russo-Persian Wars, 1804–1813 and 1826–1828, resulted in Russia permanently annexing the Caucasus. Despite fighting against Napoleon in Europe, Russia still defeated Persia, highlighting the technological and military gap between the two nations. Many Caucasian Muslims migrated to Persia, preferring to live under Persian rule rather than under Russian Orthodox authority. Persia's declining autonomy and foreign influence. As Persia weakened, its rulers increasingly relied on foreign powers, particularly Britain and Russia, playing them against each other for influence. Britain, with its control over India, viewed Persia as a strategic buffer against Russian expansion in Central Asia. By the early 20th century, foreign influence over Persian politics deepened. The 1905–1911 constitutional revolution weakened the Shah's authority, pushing for democratization and transforming Persia into a more modern state, but also leaving it vulnerable to foreign interference. The 1907 Anglo-Russian Convention divided Persia into 2 spheres of influence, disregarding the will of the Persian people. The discovery of oil and foreign intervention. The discovery of oil in 1908 significantly intensified foreign involvement in Persia, leading to corruption and economic stagnation rather than fostering national development. British and Soviet competition over Persia. By 1921, both Britain and the Soviet Union were competing for influence over Iran, primarily due to its strategically vital oil reserves. Britain supported Reza Khan, who seized power and established the Pahlavi dynasty, ruling until the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Reza Khan's government was characterized as authoritarian, nationalist and militaristic, secular and strongly anti-communist, focused on modernization but plagued by corruption and repression. His policies of westernization, including changes to clothing, women's rights, and socio-economic reforms, were met with resistance from Iran's deeply religious population. Iran during World War II and the Cold War. At the start of World War II, Iran initially leaned towards Germany, prompting an invasion by both Soviet and British forces. Iran became a crucial transit route for American military aid to the USSR under the Lend-Lease Agreement. After the war, Iran experienced political instability due to its relationship with the West. Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi tried to rule as a constitutional monarch, similar to the UK or Spain. However, tensions heightened when Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh nationalized Iran's oil industry, removing it from British control. This led to a CIA and UK-backed coup in 1953, which ousted Mossadegh and restored the Shah's absolute power. From Shah 1953 to 1973, Iran's oil industry remained under the control of Western companies. But in 1973, during the global oil crisis, the Shah reclaimed control over the country's oil, using the revenues to modernize the nation, expand the military. The 1979 Iranian Revolution and its aftermath. By the late 1970s, growing discontent with the Shah's authoritarian rule, corruption, and forced westernization led to widespread opposition. This culminated in the 1979 Islamic Revolution, which overthrew the Pahlavi dynasty, established the Islamic Republic of Iran, severed ties with the West, leading to the Iran hostage crisis. Iran-Iraq War and regional influence. In 1980, Saddam Hussein invaded Iran seeking to exploit the post-revolutionary chaos. The war resulted in a brutal 8-year conflict, 1980 to 1988, massive casualties and widespread destruction. Iraq receiving support from the USA, USSR, France, UK, Egypt, and various Arab nations. Iran's role in the modern geopolitical landscape. Today, Iran continues to face Western sanctions due to its nuclear program. However, it still plays a significant role in regional politics, particularly in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, strengthening ties with China and Russia, joining China-led international organizations like BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The Persian Empire's legacy. The Persian Empire has been one of the most powerful civilizations throughout history. Over millennia, Persia has made substantial contributions to global culture, science, and industry, profoundly shaping the course of history, particularly in the Middle East and beyond.